The body of research seeking to understand how we learn is growing exponentially. Countless journals are devoted to articles from faculty and graduate students from around the world documenting their work about effective ways to teach. Less represented in this work is research on learning in the health sciences. While much research focuses on undergraduate populations, faculty teaching our future doctors, nurses, dentists, pharmacists, and other healthcare providers have unique needs due to the older age of their students and the demands of their professions. In addition, many faculty teaching these disciplines do not come from traditional graduate schools where they would have been taught this type of research. Centers for Teaching and Learning at many schools are working with faculty to help them with their efforts related to the scholarship of teaching and learning. For a center just getting started with SoTL, how can support best be provided to their constituents? What are specific challenges and opportunities for CTLs in the health sciences? And why is collaboration especially important for these institutions? Welcome to Teach Well, Learn Well, a podcast series highlighting the scholarship being published by members of the University of Tennessee Health Science Center's community about effective ways to teach. I'm Tom Laughner of UTHSC's Teaching and Learning Center. Each month, we interview members of our faculty about their research and its impact on the higher education community. Today, I talk with three of my colleagues who co-wrote Supporting Scholarly Educators in SoTL at a Health Sciences Institution, Lessons Learned from a Teaching and Learning Center. It was published in the April 2024 edition of New Directions for Teaching and Learning. Amy Hall is one of our instructional consultants in the Teaching and Learning Center. Welcome, Amy.
Hey, Tom. Thanks for having me.
Kelly Jo Fulkerson Dikuua used to be one of our instructional consultants, but is now with Rhodes College. Welcome, Kelly Jo.
Thanks, Tom. I'm excited to be here.
And finally, we have Devin Scott, an instructional consultant here in the Teaching and Learning Center. Welcome, Devin.
Hi, Tom. Thanks for having me back to the pod.
Back to the pod. Fancy.
How about
So
that?
let's just jump right into our questions. Amy, can you talk about what is the scholarship of teaching and learning and why is it important?
Yeah, definitely. So the scholarship of teaching and learning is really this systematic inquiry or kind of research studies on issues or things that happen in the teaching and learning environment. And it has the goal of kind of transforming what happens in the classroom, whether that's in the clinical setting or whether it's in the didactic setting of the classroom. And some examples that we might think of when we think of the scholarship of teaching and learning is maybe investigating the effect of a teaching strategy on student learning, maybe reflecting on student experiences or teacher experiences with a particular strategy, or even examining the effect of a policy. And I think it's really important to conduct the scholarship of teaching and learning to really identify those evidence-based strategies that inform our scholarly teaching and lead us to improving student learning.
Thanks, Amy. Kelly Jo, you have the distinction of being at three very different kind of institutions, a large research university, now being at a small liberal arts school. Can you talk about how SoTL is particularly relevant for health science education?
Ooh, absolutely. Yes. And having been at all three institutions, one thing I can definitely say is that many of us in higher ed are expected to teach, and it's assumed that we can teach because we are experts in our field or we have extensive training in the content, but we don't always get that pedagogical support or teaching training. I think I had one teaching practicum as a graduate student, and so stepping into the classroom was really daunting. And the same is definitely true at health science centers. From my time at UT Health Science Center, I worked with some amazing educators, but one thing I heard over and over again was, I know how to do my job, I know how to work in my field, but I haven't been taught how to teach. And so one thing that SoTL can really do is to help us refine and, as Amy said, figure out what methods work, how can we support student success. When we wrote the paper together, there was one systematic review that we referenced in health science education, and it talked about how SoTL and health science could support teaching and learning, learner assessment, curriculum development, leadership, mentoring. So all kinds of kind of pieces of the teaching puzzle can benefit from SoTL work. And SoTL really opens that door to kind of teach us how to be better teachers. And it's very student-driven and very learner-driven, which is nice because we can see what works for our learners and what doesn't work.
And interesting, too, being a health science center as a teaching and learning center, we're also very interested in uncovering evidence that the kind of things that we're doing within our center are actually working. And so we've talked a lot internally about how our assessment efforts can include all these small stories as a collection, talking about how our work is impacting the teaching and learning community here at UT Health Science Center.
Absolutely.
Devin, talk a little bit about the challenges faculty face, especially in a health sciences center, when engaging in SoTL.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Tom. Yeah, so in working on this paper and working with faculty on SoTL, we've come across 4 areas that are challenges for our faculty, and we've seen faculty, in the literature highlight again and again. And those 4 are time, funding, recognition, and training or a knowledge gap. So in terms of time, health science faculty feel this time crunch particularly because they're expected to conduct research, attend conferences, publish manuscripts, and they often don't have any dedicated time for scholarship, and they're also contending with clinical load, teaching load, and administrative commitments. And in terms of funding, internal funding for SoTL is limited, across higher education, but it's very limited in terms of health sciences institutions, where a lot of support is, and especially institutional support for external grants, is leaning towards basic sciences or clinical grants. And then in terms of recognition, SoTL has been almost since its inception, I think, fighting a battle to be recognized as legitimate and something worth doing. And obviously, all of us here think that SoTL is legitimate and worth doing. And I will say that there's a lot of support for SoTL at University of Tennessee Health Science Center, but that's not necessarily the norm. And so there are a lot of faculty who want to do SoTL work, but are limited because the promotion and tenure process privileges basic science research or clinical research, or maybe even something has to be PubMed indexed, and most of your SoTL journals aren't PubMed indexed. And then one thing that we've also run into, and this alludes to what Kelly Jo was saying earlier, is that institutions like The Ohio State, while excellent, are training you in your field. And so we have some of the best, doctors. We have some of the best DNPs, some of the best pharmacists out there doing all this, but their training isn't necessarily in how to do qualitative research or quantitative research that's not basic science or clinical. And so those are the big 4 challenges. None of them are insurmountable, but time, funding, recognition, and a training or knowledge gap.
Yeah, those are excellent points, Devin. And I want to really underscore the comment you made about time, especially working with clinical faculty. I was in a meeting last week, and I've heard this many times since coming here, but when faculty do things outside of their clinical work, it's costing them real money because they can't see patients when they're spending time on teaching or spending extra time with students or thinking about SoTL and those kind of research needs.
Absolutely, Tom.
How can teaching and learning centers support SoTL at a health science institution?
Well, I think like Kelly Jo and Devin have both mentioned this, and I mention it again, that many times it's assumed that because you're a good clinician, you're a good dentist, that you're automatically going to be a good teacher and a good SoTL researcher, which unfortunately isn't always the case. So I think this is one of the main areas that a teaching and learning center can truly support SoTL, is to provide kind of focused programming that addresses those knowledge gaps. And when our faculty can do SoTL work, then they can identify those evidence-based strategies to become more effective teachers. In addition to creating that programming, I think TLC centers can also kind of foster a culture of inquiry through increasing support for faculty who wish to conduct research. So maybe partnering with an instructional consultant to do research. We might leverage SoTL to improve teaching and learning, kind of leveraging the successes that our faculty have had and kind of showing those off. And then finally, I think recognizing SoTL, whether that's through kind of teaching and learning awards, or again, kind of showing off the successes that faculty have had with SoTL.
Yeah, I think it's worth mentioning that here in the TLC, we have an award that we give every year to recognize faculty who are engaged in SoTL work, recognizing a presentation or a paper that they've written. So Amy and Devin, you've both acknowledged the need for recognition, and I think that that's one of the ways that we're doing to try to help with that. Interestingly, too, is that unlike a lot of traditional universities, many of our faculty have never engaged in SoTL research. And so they come from medical school or nursing school or whatever. So those of us that went to a traditional graduate school had to write a dissertation. And then so that was part of our training. And so as a teaching and learning center, we've had to do much more, I think, than what other centers might have to do in order to help their faculty with SoTL research. What specific strategies might a university use in order to create this culture of SoTL?
Yeah, that I love the word culture paired with SoTL because I think that it is about creating that institutional culture that SoTL is something accepted and exciting and also really beneficial, like Amy and Devin have outlined. And I was just reflecting back some of my favorite things I got to do as an instructional consultant at UT Health Science Center was partnering with faculty and writing papers or writing articles about their teaching. And I learned so much about dentistry and medicine and pharmacy from getting to do that research, just to echo what Amy said as well. But yeah, I think in building that culture, I think one thing, and Devin talked about this, institutional support is so important. Just making sure that SoTL can be recognized for tenure and promotion, that there are financial incentives in there. And that speaks to what you said, Tom, and what Amy mentioned also, just having communities of practice and spaces that teaching and learning centers can bring that allow faculty to kind of come together and talk about their teaching and partner even on SoTL projects. I think something else that's really unique about SoTL is the way that you can really directly involve students, not only as research participants, but also as co-PIs to help design SoTL projects, to help really drive the research questions. And that is a really cool way to kind of build culture and bridge that gap between faculty and students.
What are some key elements of a successful SoTL project?
Again, I'll be a broken record here. Time, funding, recognition, and training notwithstanding, I think those are vital things. But one of the things that this SoTL work that we did together, what made it successful is that we had a really good team. And so, working with you, Tom, with Kelly Jo, and with Amy, I think was instrumental for success. Something that I don't think any one of us would have been able to do to the same level on our own. And so that's all I'll say first is, having a really good team. You can do SoTL work solo, but I don't think it's as fun or rewarding as working with the team. Also, who can, keep you motivated and review your work and give you feedback on it and fill in areas where you might not be as strong. As others. And then I think next is a firm understanding of the literature. So, a deep literature review. I would look at journals that you're interested in publishing in, and then, read those journals, read some SoTL journals, and that'll help you to enter the conversation. And then I'd pick a target journal or venue for publication. So where do you want to present? Do you want to present at the International Society for the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning? Do you want to present for Pod Network? Where do you want to present this information? Is it to peers in, physical therapy peers or occupational therapy peers, audiology and speech pathology? Where does your scholarship fit in? And then I would say finding a salient problem or a gap in the literature, something really interesting, not only to your audience, but something that's interesting to you. And so you're going to want to keep working on it when this is the fifth draft and you've done data analysis for the past 2 weeks and you've done your fifth focus group with 6 sets of students or residents and you're exhausted. So something that's going to really interest you and interest your audience. And then good research questions and a match between your research questions and your research methods. So are the questions you're asking able to be answered by your approach you're taking? So if you're taking a qualitative approach, does that match the type of questions you're answering? Are you interested in perceptions and the way people communicate about things, or are you interested in something that might be solved more quantitatively? And so I think every good SoTL project starts with a good team.
Devin, as a follow-up to that, if I'm a professor and I'm interested in publishing something about my teaching work and getting engaged in SoTL, where do I go to find what journals that it might be open for me to publish in?
Yeah, and so Amy, Kelly Jo, feel free to jump in here too, obviously. But I would, if I'm at UT Health Science Center, I go to someone on the Teaching and Learning Center team, right? And talk to us, and we can help you. You can also go to your librarians. Oftentimes, they're an underutilized resource in all institutions, but in the health science institutions, and they can help you to search for it. I mentioned the International Society for the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning and Pod Network. Those are good places to go. They have journals that they publish. This piece was published in New Directions in Teaching and Learning. That's somewhere to look. And then I just would start searching for, the key terms that I want to use in my scholarship, and see where are people publishing about these types of things.
Yeah, I've got a couple of things. One is a website. It's called Jane. It's just JANE. And with that website, you can actually type in the title of your paper, and it will actually pull up journals that have published other studies that are similar to your title. So it might give you a great place to start. In addition to that, the AAMC, the Group on Educational Affairs, actually has an annotated bibliography of journals for educational scholarship. So it takes you through all of the different journals that are out there.
I think there's one I would add too. There's a conference, and I believe it's Kennesaw State. Every year it's the SoTL Summit. And I believe it's a free conference or very low cost. But it's one that I've loved going to every year, and it's very supportive and very friendly, but it's all disciplines. It's not just health sciences, though it is pretty health science heavy, but it's really cool to go to conferences and hear other educators, because some of them are very much in a developmental stage of their SoTL project. Some of them have fully published ones, but it's really cool to get ideas and hear not only what they're doing in their classrooms or in their clinics or wherever they're teaching, but also what questions they're asking about it and how they're changing their teaching practices.
Yeah, I'll put in a second plug for that conference, and also say that Kennesaw State University has this teaching journals directory. And now, while it's not health sciences specific, it has a huge list that's searchable for journals that publish SoTL work.
I will also add that faculty probably should check with their departments to make sure that any journal that they want to publish in is on a list of, especially if they're looking for tenure, that it's on a list of approved journals from their department. So what's the future of SoTL at health science institutions?
Well, I think the future is really promising and exciting, because I think it can foster an environment of continuous quality improvement, which is huge in the healthcare field. I mean, doctors are always researching their practices, looking to provide the best evidence-based medicine that they can. And so being able to kind of frame SoTL research in that idea of continuous quality improvement, I think might be able to kind of get them on board with wanting to do more SoTL. But I think a big thing is, like Devin was saying, having really good teams that continuously put forth that effort to support the faculty, whether that's through faculty development sessions, whether it's creating that positive culture around SoTL where it's more accepted as a viable way to research. We just have to make sure that that's kind of maintained over the course of time. I also think that, we have to, as researchers, really promote the field of SoTL out there to our faculty members. And I want to end with just this quote that we had in our paper. It says, based on our experiences supporting SoTL, we offer the following recommendations. All teaching and learning centers should be promoting and supporting SoTL. So again, supporting and that culture. SoTL programs should focus on creating a culture of SoTL that transcends individual colleges and departments. Successful existing programming should be leveraged to support the move from scholarly teaching to SoTL. And then prioritizing that recognition of faculty SoTL work is necessary to elevate the status of SoTL. So I really think it's just putting forth that continuous effort to do these things.
Let me ask a follow-up question to that, Amy, because I'm always thinking about how our faculty are doing wonderful research, but it's really just focused on their own classes. And so if we want to think about larger validity questions, do we need to find ways to reach out across institutions and institution types in order to be able to really make valid statements about the research that they're doing?
I think so. I mean, always being able to validate your research across many institutions is a great way to validate the research that you're doing. I know I've seen a lot of research ideas come out through the Dr. Ed listserv. They're always asking, hey, who's doing this? Or is anybody interested? I know I'm on a particular AAMC SGEA faculty development SIG, or special interest group. And we're always talking, how can we as institutions work together to solve these larger teaching and learning issues? So I think that would be well worth the effort to reach out to other institutions.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, I think also, you mentioned folks just working within, or faculty just working within their own classroom. Um, I've worked with a team that's working on de-prescribing, and we first started working in pharmacy and just talking with student pharmacists, but our work has really been enriched by working within and across UT Health Science Center. So that we're not even reaching out to other campuses for the core of this work, but we're just being so much better informed by talking to medicine students, by talking to pharmacy students, by talking to DNP students, by talking to PT students, all of that within our work, and working with faculty from all those different colleges. And so if the step to across university research is daunting, because it is harder logistically, then think about making those connections within your university and work across your university in order to enrich your research and to reach a wider audience and have more validity.
Kelly Jo, I have a question for you, and I'm afraid that we may have just already stolen your thunder on this question. But I don't know if you have other thoughts about why collaboration is so important in SoTL, particularly in the health sciences.
Yeah, well, Amy and Devin spoke to it so beautifully. But yeah, I also just wanted to add in interprofessional collaboration and education. And the SoTL is a great way to work interprofessionally. And again, I know I keep talking about students, but bring those graduate students in, bring students you're working with, and let them be a part of that as well, both the research study, but the interprofessional setting. So I do think that collaboration is so important. I know when I was working as an instructional consultant, I would often I'd be working with someone in medicine, and that they would say, oh, I'm really struggling with teaching professionalism. And then 2 hours later, I'd have a consult with someone from dentistry, and they'd talk about the same type of things. So there's so many areas that faculty members and students could benefit from having those cross-disciplinary conversations and cross-professional conversations. And I think some really powerful and interesting research can come out of it. And then also strengthen interprofessional teams in the process.
I think there's probably also opportunities for collaboration in a teaching and learning center and helping faculty make connections with folks in the library or folks in the simulation center, or there are probably other administrative departments across campus that could be brought in to help think about how to work together for some of these research projects.
Absolutely. I'm even thinking about like international student support and different things like that would be great partners to bring into a lot of these projects.
So we've written this paper and it's been published. So what are some unanswered questions that we should have after writing this paper, and what are our next steps?
Yeah, so I think the two questions are intertwined, but for unanswered questions, some things I've been thinking about are, we did all this work to support the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning at UT Health Science Center, and do faculty continue producing SoTL work on their own after working with us long term? And are faculty going out and are they building these teams? Are they building these support networks? And I think both of those questions play into our next steps, and they play into a lot of what you, Tom, Amy, and Kelly Jo have been talking about are collaboration and culture. And so I think a next step is developing this culture of SoTL at our institution, across institutions, across all health sciences, building this culture of SoTL where faculty have the time, they have the access to funds, they have the promotion tenure recognition, and they have access to a type of training that they need. And so building up this culture of SoTL and saying this is worthwhile, we see the advantages of this, and we recognize what you're doing here. And then in terms of collaboration, I want to see more TLCs at health science centers, and I want to see every TLC out there supporting SoTL work and helping faculty to build these interprofessional teams that are going to make them successful in the SoTL work they're doing. And so I think it comes down to collaboration and culture, really.
I think you're right, and it's so important. And I also want to jump on the recognition piece of that a little bit more, and some of the things that we're trying to do here in terms of recognizing our faculty. And I think one of the big ones is making sure that our community knows about papers that they've written, our research office being focused on real clinical education, making sure that they're really aware of the faculty that are doing SOTL research. And then this podcast also, I believe, is a way for us to really highlight the SOTL work that's being done here. And even though there's not a lot of traffic on these sites, it's just giving the faculty some recognition about the work that they're doing. Amy, Kelly Jo, any other thoughts on additional questions or next steps after writing this paper?
I think that those are all really exciting kind of avenues, and exciting to think about kind of faculty ambassadors in their own fields kind of leading the charge for SoTL. I think that's a really exciting thing to think about happening.
I like that SoTL
Yeah,
ambassadors.
you better
I
coin
like
that
that.
phrase in print pretty soon, Kelly Jo.
Yes, I
People are
will.
going to be coming for it.
Put a little TM next to it.
Right.
Yeah,
You heard it here first.
yeah.
So, Amy, thank you very much for your time. Kelly Jo, thank you. Devin, thank you. Thank you
Thanks,
all.
Tom.
You're welcome.
And
Thank
I
you for
really
having
enjoyed
us.
this conversation. And that's this month's episode of Teach Well, Learn Well. Thank you to Dr. Amy Hall, Dr. Devin Scott, Dr. Kelly Jo Fulkerson Dikuua for their time. I'm Tom Laughner of the Teaching and Learning Center at the University of Tennessee Health Science Center. Until next time. I'm Tom Laughner at the Teaching and Learning Center at the University of Tennessee Health Science Center. Until next time.